So wanted to ask first, Dan, thank you for your presentation. I'm wondering, you kind of mentioned this thing that was really important to my age group, irony. And your age group, the age group of people who text while they're doing a panel and their friends are talking to them. No, I'm not really chastising you.
Jeff and I do a show together once a week, Mondays, Virtual
And he texts while we're doing the show. But then sometimes I stand up and go get a coffee.
Yeah, and I'm looking up information that we don't know.
I know you're doing that. But my question is to you, if, in my generation, we were the people of irony. What was that movie with Pearl Jam? And they're all sitting around in
Singles.
Singles, right? That's my world. But your world is a little different.
They're a band.
Yeah. So what is the alternative? Well, I mean, is there anything that you can point us to in terms of an alternative to cynicism?
Yes.
In terms of culture?
It's on my phone. I'm not texting. Hold on.
All right.
Okay. There is a movement that has really picked up, I think, some really good, it's secular, it's whatever. Good ideas are good ideas. And it's a movement called the New Sincerity. And I don't know if some of you are familiar with that. Probably the name that is most commonly associated with that is David Foster Wallace, who wrote a good book called Infinite Jest that Jeff doesn't think is a good book. And
I just can't understand it yet.
Okay, well, so the New Sincerity, I'm going to read just a little bit about this. And I think this is the antidote to the bitter irony, because I think that this irony and this cynicism is just growing in us. And it becomes sort of the way that we converse, and, oh, what about that? Oh, yeah. And I think it's poisonous. And so David Foster Wallace, he has right here, he wrote an article for Salon.com. He's since died. But he has this great article on the New Sincerity. I'm not going to find it. What he says is this. Here's the new punk rock. Here's the new movement amongst writers and thinkers. It's that what we are going to do is we are going to wear our heart on our sleeves. We're going to be open and honest and not schmaltzy and not doing it in a sort of like, ooh, look what I'm doing. But he said, we are going to endure the scoffs of the so-called hip. And we are going to just put ourselves out there in good literature and good music. And he's got some short stories, and there's some bands that are doing that. And I think this new sincerity, I don't like the word authenticity, I don't like to use it very much, but sincerity. I think the New Sincerity movement, that's the antidote. And it's picked up some steam since the 2000s, so.
And this is why you dig cliches on occasion.
Oh, I love cliches. Yeah, if you listen to the show, that's all I do is I talk in cliches, because cliches oftentimes are true. Like, God helps those who help themselves. Just kidding.
You're with me, then you left. Daniel Emery Price. There was I think around the time when I was born, there was a study done at Princeton Seminary where they had a bunch of future pastors all in 3 different groups, and they had them preparing for a small sermon that they were supposed to deliver at Princeton on the Good Samaritan. And they found that all of these future pastors, as they were given a different amount of time to get to their little sermon across campus, they walked past an actor who was having a fake heart attack, and they refused to help the actor who was having a fake heart attack because they wanted to get a good grade on the assignment. Now, this is, of course, the hypocrisy in all of us, and you were kind of dragged kicking and screaming into application. But I wonder, do you have any thoughts on what is it that if we look at the new logic of Jesus, I would say like the old logic is karmic, right? Karma, you get what you deserve. And this new logic is you give people undeservingly the things that you've been given by God, and you didn't deserve it either. But how do we, without just reading the text, how do we live that? How do we create that in ourselves?
I'm not a huge fan of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He's not my favorite theologian or anything, but he did do some awesome stuff, by the way. But he has a quote that I do think is incredible. And when I first read it, I was like, that's man, that's it. Like I gotta live my life like that. And he says this, we must stop regarding people according to what they do or fail to do and according to what they suffer. And I think that's, you're talking about like sincerity and stuff like this. If you can look at a person and not see the things that they've done or the things that they've failed to do, but you can tap into the ways in which they suffer, because what's the quote you guys use? The quote you guys use all the time, where everybody is.
Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.
Yeah, like this is true, man. Like people, even people that look like they have it all together, like everybody is suffering something. I mean, a lot of this is self-imposed. I mean, like the most horrific things in my life are my fault. I mean, I wasn't born behind the 8-ball or anything. I mean, I'm white and male. I mean, like, so it's not in America. It's not that bad. But I got 2 parents who love me. They checked the box. I was homeschooled. You know, I mean, so I had everything going for me. My dad's a pastor, the whole thing, right? Like, so I got Christian parents who love me. I was born a boy. I'm white in the South. I mean, so there's not like all this suffering that I was necessarily born into, other than just being born a sinner. But I do suffer things. I've had most things in my life, you know, like, and those are my fault. And I think that if you can also audit yourself and know that, man, okay, these are the things in which I suffer. These are the things I'm ashamed of. These are the things that I try to hide. These are the things that keep me up at night. These are the things I don't think that I can ever overcome. And if you know that other people have those, and you can be a place where it's safe to express those, and if you can regard people according to them, I think that that's the application there, is that you look at people and you say, like, this is a person, and not just a person, but it's an object of God's mercy and care, as I am. So how can I do anything but regard them that way? Like, this is an object of mercy. This is someone who God cares about deeply.
Yeah, that's a great answer, because, you know, you're answering a question about what to do with a way of seeing, you know. So Jesus gives us a certain way of looking at human beings, and with compassion and these eyes.
Bonhoeffer is not bad. He fought Nazis and Life Together. You should read it.
There you go. At least, but so that takes, at least my question for you is kind of related
to vote. Never mind.
You know, I think it's really not only generous and gracious for us to see in sinners, obvious sinners, a place for compassion. You cause us to say even religious people deserve our love and respect and compassion. Is there a maybe a way you could help answer this question for me? When, if ever, is somebody so toxic, either on the really, really bad end of the spectrum or the really, really overly holy, self-righteous end of the spectrum, that I just can't deal with it? Is there ever a spot where, while I may see that God's grace is sufficient for them, maybe I don't have the strength and grace sufficient for them? When can we cut people off, if ever?
You've written more books.
Toss them softballs, and then you just
Well, I was convicted. I want to know if you can soften it for me.
Throw the Scroogey at me. I mean, come on. Yeah, I mean, I think that there are situations where perhaps, as a woman who perhaps is in a situation where she's being abused, or as a person who, I can say, I'm glad that God's grace reaches to you, but it's not. I don't know. Maybe I'm like missing the gospel entirely here, and I may very well be. But I don't think I'm called to be in like deep relationship with people who are going to continue to hit me in the head with a 2x4. I mean, Jesus was, and he did. But for me, and I'm probably wrong, but I just know, and as a person who has counseled women who are in relationships where they're being abused in some way, I'm not going to say stay there and take it. I'm not going to say that. Your husband's, he's abusing your children, so stay there and take it because God's got grace for him too. No, I'm not going to say, no. And I think in one way, maybe that's where the church and the elders can really step in and say, and that's something I would want to do. I would want to go and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Do you see where I'm being self-righteous, or would it be unwise for me to continue in this situation? So I'm probably not being helpful, but that's where I would cut it. So for me personally, if being in relationship with somebody is going to cause me consistently to get hit in the head with a 2x4, I'm not going to do it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but then again, I'm not the Lord, so in case anybody was wondering.
You're answering the question exactly what I was asking. Because
the Lord is not a woman.
What's that?
Totally not.
That was a joke because I said about the LCMS earlier, and Jeff got
keep picking
uncomfortable
on it.
about that. But there's a line real fast that is in Jeff's forthcoming book, and I forgot the second part of it. You do it.
The chapter on divorce. Everybody's fallen. Everybody's redeemable, but it might be the case that not everybody's redeemable by you. And the idea would be that there are times when religious people in our life or abusive sinners, that's what we were going for, might get to the point where they extinguish the joy and the flame within us that is able to give love and grace to other people around us. And I think that, to me, would be part of the principle. I mean, like you said, Jesus is the one who takes the whole sin of the world on to himself. But we can't do this. We just can do the best we can to take at least a little bit of that. Luther says he says it in several places, but he says in the freedom of the Christian, or on Christian liberty, he says we don't just forgive sins. We take people's sins upon ourselves as if they were our own. I mean, that's an amazing concept, that not only would you just say, well, you sinners are okay, we're going to pretend as if we're in the same boat. And in fact, we are. But at some point, there are things that then can crush you because you are being traumatized by these individuals. And I think maybe not only is the grace of Christ sufficient to be able to be something we could give out to the worst of sinners, it's also sufficient for us to say we're free not to impale ourselves when we get to our limit. Did you have something on that one?
Well, I think there's a difference between, so there might be certain sins that you're just like, well, I just can't deal with that. Like that would be like a wrong thing. So like you're not talking about someone who's like abusing you, or like where you're in danger of being hurt, or you're putting other people at risk, like children and that sort of thing. Obviously, that situation, you can't be the ambassador there. Like you've got to go and be helped. That's different than finding out that this guy over here did this thing that really didn't have anything to do with you, but you're just like, that's just too much for me. Like, there's grace for that being too much for me, right? No, actually, there's not. I mean, there is. Like, you're going to be forgiven for that, but that's not a way out. That does require forgiveness. I think that when you're talking about all of this kind of stuff, like, this stuff is messy, and so I know for me, when I think about like all things being made new, and I always try to like do this to myself first, right? Instead of being like, man, I'll be straight. Like, there's some people in this life that I don't want to be around because like I've been hurt really badly. I've had terrible things said and done, and I don't want to be with you. That's true, because it's so damaged. Those relationships are so damaged that they're not going to be fixed here. And I'm talking about like with other Christians, okay? So that does happen. Like it's I'm not capable, they're not capable, that's it. But there's a beautiful thing, though, because the promise is one of the things I'm most looking forward to. This might be sacrilege. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing Jesus. That's cool. But when all things are made new, I will be able to stand face to face with people I've hurt and people who've hurt me. That we cannot do that here. And there we will be brothers and sisters. There we will all that will be made right with other Christians with whom is too much now. It won't be too much then. No, that will be that too shall be made right, and I think that's the hope.
Yeah, I want to throw this in real fast because sometimes we're trigger happy, and I think that I look at my own life, and of course we call her Saint Methan, but she, for our marriage, she lived half of our marriage with me as read the book, as a terrible, terrible addict who I keep thinking should have walked away, and she stayed there, and now we have now we have a very good marriage, and it took that, and I think she would have had every right to ditch me 8 years ago. So I just caution about the trigger happiness, and so that's the only thing I would throw in there. I think you're right about and I think both of you are right, but in our culture of it's not working, I think we just want to make sure that we don't fall into that trap.
Brilliant. So questions or comments? I'll come around. Here we go.
So I was thinking about God helps those who help themselves, and I'd be curious to hear about your thoughts about the recovery movement in churches today, and different brand names and the way they roll out. But I was just sitting there thinking, I said, is that the message that's being given maybe, is God helps those who helps themselves through this type of ministry? And I think also just to tag on to that, where my experience in these types of groups have been those besetting sins that cause people to end relationships that aren't necessarily using a bat on someone, but those things like pornography or prescription drug abuse that they just can't lay aside, in those types of things. That's what you see a lot of that in recovery. And so I'm thinking about the parables and those kind of things. What would be your response to that?
Well, the quote, I was being flippant a little bit about God helps those who help themselves, because there was something a while back on the radio where I think it was the White Horse Inn, where they went around and said, "Is this in the Bible?" And like 80% of the people at the Christian Bible, store convention said, "Yeah." And I think when it gets to, and especially in American culture, when it gets to Robert Schuller style, or even worse, like the Benny Hinn, and it becomes dangerous. And I think that's where I don't have contempt. I have love for those that are being fleeced. I think that that is wrong. Now, there's another parable that Jeff talks about, and I don't know it exactly, but it's